Hi, good evening everyone. So thank you so much for taking the time. So as aligned, after the quiz last Wednesday, I already sent yung grades or the class standing after the two quizzes for module 3. So like what I've mentioned, dalawang barriers na lang what we have to overcome before the sem ends. First would be the quiz tomorrow. So comprehensive PPE quiz. And then number two would be in terms of the module 3 exam, right? So ang remaining schedule na lang natin would be we have a quiz and then I will ask anyone if meron pa silang kailangan ng consultation and then we'll go straight to the exam. So directionally, I think naman in terms of the performance of the quizzes, parang a lot of people are getting the concepts. Medyo may mga slight mistakes lang. So, kailangan talaga puliduhin lang natin yung mga things that we need to learn. With that said, if you really take a step back, you'd understand na 50% of the exam would be receivables and 50% of the exam would be property, plant, and equipment. Now, ano ba yung mga madadali, right? So, for those, I already gave you the grades that you should aim for in your Module 3 exam. Now, let's not, parang, for me, my dream or parang the grade na I'm aiming for is at least 80 tayo lahat sa exam. So, how do we do that? Well, number one, kailangan magaling tayo sa theory. And then number two, kailangan makasagot tayo ng maraming short prompts, right? So, again, my major tip for everyone would be it's best to know 100% of a particular problem or a particular problem type kaysa parang ikakram nyo lahat and then parang hindi nyo masugutan. So with this, let's first go into PPE. So for PPE, based on my experience, ang pinakamadali would be, or yung mga chances nyo of getting points, yung hindi masyadong complex but really more of mastery lang and sipag sa aral, would be number one, classification. So please, maraming points nasasayang because a lot of people don't know the proper classification of PPE costs. Ika-capitalize ba? Capitalize meaning you will treat it as part of the asset or i-expense or treated as another asset. Right? So usually ang gagawin sa inyo, ibobombard kayo ng a lot of information and then i-classify nyo. Is this land? Is this land improvement? Are these expenses? Etc. etc. Please don't let those points go to waste. Right? So madali na yun dapat. So please redo all of the classification exercises. That's one. Number two, ang common na pamatay for everyone for PPE is depreciation. Probably because parang nako-complicated sila in terms of the process. If you really want to do well in terms of the exam, depreciation is the one that you need to focus on sa PPE. Well, considering na mastered nyo na yung mga subtopics, right? But at the very least, please, kapag mayroong mga short probs na isang straight line lang or units of activity, please make sure that you're able to do it. Ano yung mga usual na pamatay? Double declining method and change in useful life and estimate. So, after you've mastered straight line and units of activity, please, 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 do it twice, do it 3 times. Be an expert in double declining and change in useful life and estimate. And then finally, and this is probably one of my more important tips, don't take disposals for granted. Yung mga gain or loss on exchange, yung mga exchanges of old equipment and new equipment, these are different subtopics. So, kuwari, talagang depreciation, nahirapan kayo, yun pa yung mga matatagal sagutan. If there are quiz items or module items that are disposal, na madali lang naman intindihin if you really follow the procedure, go for those. So classification and disposal, make sure those are sure points. Depreciation, do your best to master it. Pero kailangan paulit-ulit nyo. Pero realistically, ang mga mahahabang problems and yung mga challenging would be change in useful life and estimate. So for today, I'll brush through again the different exercises. In terms of the exercises that I'll be sharing, these are my recommended. So meaning, at the very least, at least pasadahan nyo ulit yung mga ma-mention ko today before your quiz tomorrow and of course before your exam. So let's go muna into an overview. So honestly, Module 3, after receivables, we're gonna be taking a deep dive na in terms of your long-term assets. So that would be your property, plant, and equipment, or what we say is your PPE, which is comprised of your land improvement, building, and equipment. You have your investment property na basically is held for sale. You have your intangible assets, and then you have your mineral resources. So yung 50% na yon, you can further subdivide into PPE, intangibles, and mineral resources. So binigyan ko na kayo ng tips on how to master PPE. My next request, please make sure na wag nyo rin sayangin yung points related to intangible assets and mineral resources. Sure yan, hindi ko pa nakita yung exam, but I'm sure because they're separate subtopics, meron at meron rin lalabas in terms of intangible assets and mineral resources. So if you're like me na when I was a student, kinakabahan ako sa depreciation, what I'd master would be classification of property, plant, and equipment, intangible assets. Kapag tinanong nila, ano yung amount na to na sa patent, ano yung amount sa trademark, alam ko yan kasi alam ko lahat ng costs associated. Number 2, gain or loss on disposal on PPE. And then number 3, mineral resources. Yung mga depletion na yan, dapat parang magaling na kayo because it's similar to units of activity in terms of depreciation. So for me, yun yung strategy. So for those na nag-overwhelm, ganun yung aral natin. So now, let's go to property, plant, and equipment. So again, important things to note. So 4 yung long-term asset. The question is, paano ba natin malalaman if it's a property, plant, and equipment or an investment property? Well, sa PPE, ang importante lang malaman is tons. So this is theory muna. It has to be tangible asset and should be used for operations and should not be intended for sale. So for example, ako, bumili ako ng lot in Antipolo. If I plan to just let that lot appreciate and then sell it, that would be considered an investment property because I held it for what we call capital appreciation. Nag-appreciate. So, sinasabi ko lang, 2025, 7 million yung lot sa Antipolo. 2030, nabenta ko for 10 million. Umakyat ng 3 million, that's capital appreciation. Or, kapag pinaupa ko, bumili ako ng condo malapit sa UP, pinaupahan ko, I held it for rent, that would be investment property. Versus PPE, bumili ka ng land, bumili ka ng building, and you use it for your operations. Not for rentals, not for capital appreciation, but for operations. So, important theory point, PPE is used for your operations, while your investment property is for rental and capital appreciation. So now, we're clear. Dalawa na out of the 4 yung clear tayo. PPE versus intangible assets. Let's now take a deep dive into PPE. So PPE, 4 yung major classifications. Land improvement, building, and equipment. Again, ito yung first thing that you have to master so that you get sure points. First, ano yung mga costs that you should include as part of the value of the land? So first would be your purchase price. So anything that you used to pay in order to buy the land, kailangan i-capitalize. So when we add it as a part of an asset, that means we capitalize it to land. So ano yung mga kinakapitalize natin? Purchase price like stamp taxes, settlement costs, commissions, accrued property taxes and liens, and necessary costs and purpose. So now, I will take the time to again highlight specific parts. Ano ba yung mga common mistakes? Ano ba yung mga common nakakalimutan ng mga tao when it comes to adding or classifying or capitalizing costs on land? First, any cost helps you to settle the purchase of the land should be capitalized to land. So pag meron kayo nakita, closing fees, closing costs, escrow fees, broker commission, legal fees in order to buy the land, title fees for investigation or conveyance, all of those are necessary costs in order for you to be able to acquire the land. Therefore, ika-capitalize natin yan. Again, closing costs, escrow fees, brokers' commissions are part of what we call our settlement cost. These are costs for you to be able to settle and be able to purchase the land. All of these, the ones in green, are capitalizable to land. So yan yung mga common mistakes, yan yung mga common nakakaligtaan. Next, let's talk about taxes. Usually, kapag bumibili kayo ng lupa, may mga tendency na yung binibilihan nyo ng lupa, they don't pay for the taxes properly. Or meron silang accrued property tax and liens. So, when you buy or pay the sales tax to buy the land, any sort of tax that in order for you to buy the land, all of those are capitalizable to land. So, any tax that you have to pay to buy the land is capitalizable. However, let's say nabili mo na yung land. Let's say nabili mo na yung 7 million lot sa Antipolo. The next year, sisingilin ka ng real property tax because you own land and therefore you owe the government. Those are what you call annual real property tax. And ano yung rule? If it's an annual recurring expenditure, we do not capitalize. So yung mga tax na yon, yung annual real property tax, yung mga babayarin mo year in, year out, are outright expense. So again, annual real property tax or outright expense. But taxes in arrears, land mortgage, delinquent taxes, for you to be able to buy the land, ika-capitalize. So ang general rule is, yung tax, kapag yung tax, you need to pay for it in order to acquire the land, capitalize. Any tax that you pay after, like your annual real property tax, you expense. Okay? So let me know lang if you have any questions in the chat or you can raise your hand. Pero these are super important in terms of, kasi isa lang makaligtaan nyo, hindi nyo na makukuha yung right balance or carrying value, right? Next. Anything that is in the necessary cost in order to bring it to the intended purpose. So, pare, doon sa Antipolo, malaki yung bangin. Or kailangan gusto mo i-level. Or gusto mo i-grade. Grading, leveling, landfill, land survey, all of those are land. Okay? Again, grading, leveling, landfill, lahat yon land. Not to be confused with excavation. Excavation naman is for in preparation for a building. So excavation is a building cost. Ang importante lang would be sa land, grading, leveling, landfill, land survey, all of those are capitalizable. And the last thing is, kuwari, dun sa lupa na yon, may trees or parang may shack, may shed galing sa nagbabantay before ng property. Syempre, ayaw mo ng maraming puno or ayaw mo ng maraming sheds. So anong gagawin mo doon? You will have it removed. So removing of trees, removing of sheds, you should capitalize as part of the cost of land. However, it should be net of sale proceeds. So for example, meron kang land, binili mo for 100,000. On that piece of land, merong shed, parang tiny doghouse or some tiny shed na lalagyanan ng mga itak of the previous owner. Siyempre, you want to get it removed. So, you pay to remove that shed for 10,000 pesos. So, ginaba. Yung shed na yon made out of wood. So, meron kang mga extra pieces of wood. You sold those pieces of wood for 5,000 pesos. The question is, what should be the total land value? The answer is the land of 100,000, the purchase price, plus the removal cost of the shed of 10,000 minus the 5,000 scrap. Bakit minus? Because hindi na siya cost. Parang, di ba, initially ang cost mo buong 10,000. Pero yung 10,000 na yun, may nabawi kang 5,000. And therefore, the total value of the land is 105,000. So, ano yung mga common mistakes? Gets ng mga tao na removal cost should be capitalized and sold scraps is related to that. Pero usually, ang common mistake is, yung 10,000, ina-add nila pa yung 5,000. So, nagiging 115,000, which is wrong. Again, ang logic dito is, you have to capitalize the cost of clearing the trees less how much you were able to sell kung ano man yung nakuha mo in spare of that, right? So, in terms of this example, it's land, 100,000 plus removal costs of any shed or trees. And then pag may nabenta ka doon, minus 5,000 equals the total land. So the last thing that I want you to know for land is that land does not depreciate. Again, land does not depreciate. So paulit-ulit, meaning that it is the only property equipment that does not decline in service potential over its useful life. Again, I'll repeat. Land does not depreciate. It's the only PPE that does not decline in service potential over the useful life, right? So again, land does not depreciate. It's the special characteristic of land. So now, let's move on to land improvements. Well, honestly, land improvements, ang tatandaan nyo lang dito are two things. Land improvements are those that are structural additions made on the land. So, ang mga common yan is like car spaces, parking lots, sewage system, underground sprinklers. All of those are land improvements. And again, yung land improvements is a separate classification. Hindi siya land, hindi siya building, hindi siya equipment. It's a class on its own. It's land improvement. And if tinanong sa inyo, how do we depreciate land improvement? Well, we depreciate it over the land improvement's useful life. Some people have the misconception na, baka we should use the useful life of land. Or maybe we should use the useful life of buildings in the land to depreciate land improvements. No. Very straightforward. Walang shorter of, longer of, wala. You only depreciate land improvements over what? The useful life of land improvements. Again, walang shorter or longer. It's very straightforward. Land improvements, you depreciate it over the land improvements useful life. So pag nililito kayo, binigyan kayo, useful life of land, 10. Useful life of building, 20. Useful life of land improvements, 15. Anong gagamitin yung useful life in years? 10, 20, or 15? Very straightforward. We use the useful life of the land improvement at 15 years. So now, first example that I want you to revisit. This is a more parang iniba ko lang yung given. So, please solve with me. If nakuha nyo to, most likely you get how to solve classification. So, please answer with me now. Number 1. How do we... sorry. Okay, sorry. Okay, Gabe. So, cash price of 1 million, we put it in land. Right? Accrued taxes. So, accrued taxes, usually, you pay that before you're able to purchase. So, under land pa rin siya. Taxes in arrears on the property, mga past taxes, in order for you to acquire the land, 15,000 under land. So, dalawa na yung tax. Accrued taxes and taxes in arrears under land. Capitalized pa lang siya. However, real property taxes paid annually. Again, paid annually. So what it connotates is that ito yung mga taxes na babayaran mo na after mong ma-acquire yung land. So magiging 30,000 dito sa expenses. So it's an expense. Annual real property taxes are outright expense. Right? Removing of shed and trees. Nakuha na natin yan, 20,000 under land. Parking lot, land improvement. Filling and grading. Filling, grading, land survey, all of those are land. Sale of scraps from shed and trees. That would be 10,000. But again, ang mangyayari is you have to partner removing of shed and trees and yung sale of scraps. So ang mangyayari is that 20,000 yung cost pero may nabawi kang 10,000. So net-net, ang cost mo lang na i-capitalize is 10K. Okay? So kaya to, please take note, kaya to negative. Okay? And then finally, landscaping is land improvement. Clearing and grading, land pa rin. Closing fees, 5,000. So closing fees are settlement cost. Broker commissions fees, 10,000. And then with that, we're done. You, pare exam to. And then ang tanong is, how much is the land? How much is land improvement? And how much was the net income impacted? 6 points yun, right? And if you are able to classify it properly, you'll be able to get 1.1,210,000 for land, 490,000 for land improvement, and 30,000 for expense. And those are 6 points. Kaya please, huwag niyong sayangan yung mga classification. Please go back to the slides, understand and memorize ano yung mga common mistakes. So again, we depreciate land improvement over its useful life. So ganito yung journal entry. Are there any questions before I proceed? If none, I'll go straight. Next, well, building, pare-pareho lang rin naman yan. Please take note na lang ng mga remodeling, etc., etc. And also, syempre, mga architect fees, interest expense. I leave it that to you as your homework. Just know your buildings. Ano yung mga costs associated with it. Pero kasi, for me, mas intuitive pag buildings. So, excavation, temporary quarters for crew, safety fence around site and removal, interest expense to finance the project. All of those are building. I'll leave it up to you to master that. For equipment, ano lang yung importanteng tandaan sa equipment? Any cost that you need to do to bring it to its intended use is capitalizable. Meaning, insurance during transit, so again, insurance during transit, dismantling at the current location, safety rails, cooling devices, testing the unit, lahat yon costs in order for you to bring it into its intended use. So all of those are capitalizable. On the other hand, lahat ng annual recurring expenditures like motor vehicle registration, ordinary repairs, insurance after installation, and truck licenses are annual expenditures that are outright expense. So truck licenses are outright expense. So let's look at an example. You have a purchase price of 420, so equipment. Sales tax, so importante yan for you to buy it, 25. Insurance during transit, 35. Truck license, 220 expense because the license is an annual recurring expenditure. So think driver's license, di ba? Paulit-ulit yung license nyo. Motor vehicle license, 12,000. Delivery cost, 6,000. So the cost to bring it to its intended use is capitalizable. Painting and logo. So naglagay ka ng logo sa gilid ng truck or naglagay ka ng logo or ng painting dun sa equipment. that is capitalizable. Ordinary repairs are expense, and then water devices to cool the product is here. So if you add all of those together, you'll have equipment of 515,500 and an expense of 284,000. So equipment, taxes and licenses, repairing expenses, and then cash. Okay. Sorry. So basically that's equipment. And to summarize, these are land improvement, buildings, equipment. Okay. So merong tanong. Good evening. Bakit po hindi considered yung trees, pati po yung kasama po niya as land improvements? So there is a difference between, imagine nyo, bumili kayo ng lot in Rizal, mabukid siya. Those trees are inherently in the land, right? Those are inherently in the land. Now, syempre, bakit ka bumili ng lupa? Most likely, magpapaalam ka sa government na i-uproot mo yung trees so that you can build whatever establishment you want. Those trees aren't land improvements. They're just part of the land. And for you to be able to get it to its intended use, which is usually itong patag na to, you have to remove it. And therefore, that's part of the cost of the land, right? Bakit siya hindi land improvement? Because hindi mo siya sinadya as a structural addition. In contrast, patag yung land. Pero sabi mo, parang medyo bare siya. Magpa-landscape tayo. Let's put mga bonsai, maglagay tayo ng mga circular trees dito, lagyan tayo ng pathway, lagay tayo ng garden na parang may rabbit-shaped hedge. Yun, hindi yung trees. Those are landscaping, right? And those are land improvements. So yun yung difference. I hope that was clear. To the person that asked the question, clear ba yung explanation na yun? Okay, clear. Okay, good. So, ganun lang. So, wag kayo malito. So, clearing of trees, automatic. So, that's the logical way of thinking about it. The memorized kind of way is clearing of trees, anything that selling of timber, lahat yon land. So, that's the first thing. Number 2, may tanong. Okay. Itong mga example, yung useful life, yung 15, 5, 10, and 15, those are just examples. It's not the thing that you have to memorize. Itong mga to, yung 10, 20, 15, this is just to illustrate the point that we only depreciate under the useful life of our land improvement. Yun. So with that, we're done with classification of your land improvements, buildings, and equipment. And all of these are initially recognized. Okay. So will it be uploaded as playlist? I'll try to upload it tonight. Pero again, as you know, all of these reviews, ideally, to maximize it for your quiz tomorrow. So hopefully, you'll be able to rewatch it later. Yun. So yeah, I'll try to upload it then. There. So last, meron mga things na usually during the life of your PPE, the additional expenditures, it would, magkakaroon kayo additional expenditures. Like for example, the pinaka-easiest is think laptop or think laptop. Gagastos ka ng 15,000 for a new motherboard. Sorry, hindi ako tech person. Let's just in the fantasy land of computers. Bumili ka ng motherboard na external na it will maintain yung capacity ng computer mo. So for example, computer mo, bumili ka ng motherboard that will maintain the current performance nung binili mo. that additional expenditure, ika-capitalize mo ba as part of equipment or as an expense? In order for you to know the answer, ang tanong lang is, yung addition ba yon na binili mo, does it merely maintain the usefulness of the of the equipment, or does it improve its functionality? Well, yung motherboard in this scenario, it just merely maintains. Kaya it should be expensed as ordinary repairs. On the other hand, so again, hindi rin ako experts in cars, but let's just say, bumili ka ng boost engine, whatever, for your car. Before, yung top speed ng car mo was 200 kilometers per hour. Dahil nilagyan mo ng booster pack or whatever, naging 300 kilometers per hour siya. So now, it improved the operating efficiency of the PPE. So it will be capitalized to that particular PPE. So again, anytime may tinatanong sa inyo about additional expenditures, the thing that you ask yourself would be, does it improve the operating efficiency and the useful life? If yes, we will capitalize as part of the PPE. If no, and it merely maintains, if it merely maintains, we will outright expense. So maraming nalilito dito. So please make sure na you know. So if it improves the operating efficiency, it improves the useful life, that's capital expenditures. If it merely maintains, it will be expense to ordinary repairs. Okay, we're done na with classification. So with that, I hope na clear sa inyo how important it is to go back to the slides, memorize the costs, or familiarize yourselves with the common mistakes in terms of the costs, so that you'll be able to classify them properly. The next step and the next barrier we have to overcome is depreciation. Again, ito yung medyo magiging bulk of our discussion for tonight, pero I don't want you to waste your time na kuwari tonight all-nighter kayo, ang alam nyo lang depreciation. That's the wrong way to study for accounting. Ipunin nyo yung other subtopics. So, for me, prioritize knowing gain or loss on sale, exchanges of equipment, intangible assets, and yung depletion in mineral resources. I-perfect nyo yun with classification para you have a fighting chance in terms of like the other topics. And then pag sure na kayo doon, balik kayo sa depreciation. So ako right now, I will just highlight some of the exercises we've shared in class para lang gets nyo. Kasi when you think about it, depreciation should be very intuitive. Kailangan gets nyo lang yung process. So I will share 4 to 5 exercises on depreciation. Some things na similar to what we've discussed before. Ang kailangan yung i-double check is nagigets nyo ba yung process, right? And the idea here lang naman in terms of depreciation is that when you buy your equipment, you will always measure it at the cost of the point of purchase. Lahat ng pinaghirapan natin sa classification, yung mga registration, etc., etc. Pag na-compute nyo yun, that will be the cost of your PPE. The next thing you will do is that, except for land, you will depreciate your equipment, you will depreciate your land improvement, you will depreciate your buildings. And therefore, sa financial statement or at the subsequent recording, you should always measure it at net PPE. So that is cost of your property, plant, and equipment minus AC debt minus AC impairment plus any capital expenditures. So capital expenditures is anything that will improve the operating efficiency or improve the useful life of the equipment. So, ang importante lang malaman, honestly, impairment, ang kailangan nyo na malaman is that it's different from depreciation in that the PPE should not be carried at more than its recoverable amount. Very similar to our impairment theory in receivables. So, hindi ko na yan hindi naman siya gano'n ka-importante for PPE right now, right? So, kailangan gets nyo lang yung concept ng impairment. Ang kailangan yung tutukan is that net PPE will always be, or most of the time, will just be cost minus act depth. So, pag tinatanong sa inyo palagi, ano yung carrying amount? Ano yung carrying amount at X date? It's just, ano yung cost ng equipment minus the act depth for that particular date? Yun lang. Usually, yan yung mga major tatanong sa inyo. Ano yung depreciation expense annually or for this particular year? Number 2, ano yung act depth as of this date? And number 3, ano yung carrying amount? Yun lang naman usually tinatanong sa depreciation. And usually, pag kinakabahan kayo, matatakot kayo sa carrying amount. But carrying amount is just that cost minus accumulated depreciation. So, how do we depreciate properties? So, tatlo lang naman yan eh. Straight line, declining balance, and units of activity. Honestly, straight line, units of activity should be easy. Declining balance, medyo intimidating, but if you have the extra time, this is the one thing you need to master. Ito yung magsiseparate from the people that pass and the people that will get a high score in the module of the exam. The people that truly understand depreciation. So, mag-overview muna tayo sa depreciation. Why depreciate? It's because, let's say, bumili ako ng land or medyo mahirap intindihin. So, imagine itong icon na to, it's a phone. Let's say I bought a phone for $1,300, right? $1,300. When I buy it, including any of the sales tax, etc., na-classify ko na properly, that is the cost of the land. For the whole life in the financial statement, PPE iPhone or PPE Samsung or PPE Android phone, whatever, the cost will still be 1,300. But as you know, the more you use your phone, the more it depreciates in value. Now, let's say that in estimate, yung mga phones nyo only has a useful life that is limited or finite. And let's say na, in terms of the useful life, let's say 4 years. 4 years yung useful life ng iPhone. Every 4 years, magpa-blackout na yan or whatever, or sobrang lagi na, hindi nyo na magamit. So, after 4 years, you expect na ibebenta mo na siya at the end of its useful life. And yung kakonting pera na mababawi mo doon in order to sell it at the end of its useful life is what you call the residual value. So, imagine, I bought a phone, $1,300, 4 years lang yung useful life niya. After 4 years, medyo mabagal na mag-respond, naglalag na palagi, mabilis na mawala ng bat. At the end of 4 years, ubos na yung useful life niya. Pero hindi naman siya totally worthless. Pwede akong pumuntang Lazada or FB Marketplace. I can sell it as a second-hand phone and I'll probably get around $300. That $300 or the value at the end of its useful life is its residual value. Now, ano yung mangyayari dun sa natirang 1,000? That 1,000 is what you call your depreciable amount. It's the portion of the cost that depreciates over the span of its useful life. So, pag tinanong ko sa inyo, if the depreciation amount or the depreciable amount is 1,000 and it's spread across 4 years, how much yung depreciation expense niya for the 4 years? Well, it's just simply 1,000 divided by 4 equals 250. So, ang mangyayari is that yung PPE mo from 1,300, every year, may depreciation expense yan for 250, 250, 250, 250, until at the end, 1,000 na yung nabawas doon sa depreciable amount niya of 1,000. Magiging residual value. So, cost minus depreciable amount is equal to your residual value. Make sense? Cost of 1,300 minus depreciable amount of 1,000 is equal to your residual value. And then, we know that this one, yung depth X na to, magiging act depth lang. So, 250 yung act depth niya in year 1, 500 magiging year 2, 750 in year 3, and then in year 4, magiging 1,000. Pataas lang ng pataas yung accumulated depreciation mo. It's the depreciation of the total life of that particular equipment. Clear naman so far? Any questions or thumbs up if everything is clear? So that we can proceed to the examples. Okay, so now let's master the basics. So wala munang complication. So if there's one thing na I want you to redo, it's Freeman transportation, right? Because it will show you how to answer everything. Ang nangyari is that si Freeman raw has 3 buses. Iba-iba the way it depreciates. You have a straight line for bus 1, you have declining balance for bus 2, and you have units of activity for bus 3. So, anong maganda kay Freeman? The very first thing I want you to do, whether it's notes receivable or PPE, please, check nyo kung kailan pinili or na-issue. Pag sa note receivable, please check kung kailan in-issue yung notes receivable. For PPE, please check kung kailan binili. Dahil binili siya on January 1, this is a simple problem because it's not a mid-year purchase, right? So, 1 year siya from the fiscal year end, right? So, itong fiscal year end niya is December 31, right? So, wala tayong problema masyado. So, first is, I want you to please master the shortcut in solving for straight line depreciation. Si straight line lang yung may shortcut at si units of activity, right? Si double declining, gagawa talaga kayo at gagawa ng table, right? So, ano yung shortcut? Sa straight line, ang importante lang naman is that you get the annual depreciation. That's the only thing. Kapag straight line, you just need to get your annual depreciation expense. And how do you get it? It's depreciable amount divided by your useful life, right? Divided by your useful life. So in this case, ang binigay sa inyo is that si Boss 1 raw has a cost of 96,000. The first thing that you will look for would be your residual value of 6,000. 96,000 minus 6,000 of residual value, your total depreciable amount is 90,000. So we're done with the first thing that we need, the depreciable amount. The next thing na hanapin nyo is yung useful life. According to the problem, it has a useful life of 5 years. So now, the last thing that you will double check is kailan ba binili. Again, the last thing you will double check is kailan ba binili. Binili siya January 1. So therefore, wala tayong problema. In the first year of its useful life, it will be 12 months worth of depreciation. And in the last year, it will be 12 months if depreciation. So now, we can solve. What's our annual depreciation? 90,000 divided by your useful life of 5 will give you an annual depreciation of 18,000. Now, alam natin that the annual depreciation every year, 18,000, 18,000, 18,000. The question is, how many years tayo to December 31, 2020? Kasi ang hinihingi sa inyo is, what is the carrying amount of Bus 1 at December 2020? Of course, you can make your table, pero maraming depreciation, maraming notes receivable exercises, sobrang kulang sa time. So, ano yung pinakamadali? If alam nyo na that the annual depreciation is 18,000 per year, bilangin nyo na lang ilang years to the date na hinihingi. So for this, binili siya January 1, 2018. We're counting to December 31, 2020. Ilang years nag-depreciate? 2018, 2019, 2020. 3 years. So times 3. So my act debt for the whole 3 years will be 54,000. So ano yung carrying amount? The carrying amount, again, is the cost minus the act debt at that time. So the cost is 96,000 minus accumulated depreciation of 54,000 will give you a carrying amount of 42,000. So automatic, you don't even have to make the table. May 4 points na kayo or 6 points. Annual depreciation, act debt, carrying amount. So ito yung table format. So please memorize how to make the table also. Carrying amount and then basically depreciation expense lang yan. And then as you can see, paakyat lang ng paakyat si act debt, right? So from 18, 36 naging 54. Bakit tayo nagkaroon ng shortcut? It's because sa straight line, same lang yung depreciation expense niya every year. So it's just 1, 2, 3. So ang act debt is 3 times 18,000, kaya naging 54,000. Kaya sa straight line lang nagkakaroon ng shortcut. Please be careful. Nagagawa lang natin yung shortcut because it's in the first year. Right? It's in the first year of your hindi siya mid-year purchase, right? So mag-ingat kayo kung mid-year. Hindi kailangan it's in not annual pero monthly nyo gagawin, right? So please be careful. I'll share with you that when we talk about mid-year purchases. Pero yun lang yung concept of straight line. So please master straight line depreciation kasi that's the most basic, right? So most basic. The next is declining balance. And honestly, the declining balance, you have no way of going about it but just to understand na the first thing na kinukuha lang natin is the declining balance rate or our DBR, which is N times 1 over the useful life. So N is either 2 if double declining or 1.5 if 150%. So a lot of our exercises, 2 yung ginagamit, pero please remember na if it's 150% declining balance, it's 1 point. And then we just multiply our DBR to our carrying amount to get our depreciation expense. So punta tayo kay boss 2. Si boss 2 has a cost of 140,000, a residual value of 10,000, and a depreciable amount of 130,000. The useful life is 4 years. And then the purchase date is Jan 2018. So 12 months, 12 months. So now we can get our DBR, which is 2 kasi double declining times 1 over 4 na useful life. Will give you 50% DBR or declining balance rate. Now, ang i-multiply mo is the carrying amount. Carrying amount. Not the depreciable amount. It's the carrying amount. So 140,000. Carrying amount times DBR. So, carrying amount, 140 times 50%, so 70. And then, naging 70 na lang times 50%, 35. And then, 35 times 50%, 17.5. And then, lastly, yung 17.5, mapapansin nyo, 50% of 17.5 will make it less than the carrying amount, which is 10,000. So, ang special sa double declining is in the last year of its useful life, rather than filling it up with 50% DBR, we will force it to be equal to its carrying amount of 10,000. So, 17.5, gagawin natin 10,000. So, ang depreciation expense to make it 10,000 is 7.5. And then finally, may act debt ka of 130,000, which is still the same, right? So basically, yun lang yung double declining. So ang mahirap lang or common mistakes is you multiply double declining rate or DBR to your carrying amount of 140,000. And dun sa last year, you don't use your DBR, you just force it, right? You force it. You force it to be equal to your residual value. So these are the exercises that you should be paying attention to. Okay. Next, and the last is units of activity. Honestly, pareho lang si units of activity with straight line depreciation. Ano lang yung difference? The useful life is not in years, but in terms of units of activity. So, instead of getting the depreciation, annual depreciation, what we're getting instead is what we call our DPU, or our depreciable depreciation expense per unit, which is basically your depreciable amount divided by your useful life in terms of activity. And then every year, itetest mo lang how many units yung na-consume times the DPU, and that will give you your depreciation expense. So in bus 3, it has a cost of 92,000, a residual value of 8,000. So how do we get our depreciable amount? 92,000 minus 8 is equal to 84,000. Our useful life is now not in years, but in activity. So 120,000 miles. So now we get our DPU. 84,000 divided by 120 of a DPU of 0.70. And then, it said na until December 2020, it has ran for 60,000 miles. So now, that will give you the ACT depth of 0.70 DPU times ACT depth ay miles use of 60,000, 42,000. So what is your carrying amount? It's 50,000, which is the cost of 92,000 minus your ACT depth equals your 50,000. So with that said, ganito lang rin yung itsura ng DPU. Ano yung shortcut na ginamit natin? Ang shortcut na ginamit natin was we added 24,000 and 36,000. Ginawa nating 24 plus 36 is 60 para we get the carrying amount in December 2020. So again, I'll leave it up to you to redo these exercises. I've already uploaded all the PowerPoints for this, so please just double check. But generally, ganun lang yung gagawin. Now, let's add one layer of complexity. And honestly, ang expectation namin is that magaling na kayo dapat sa depreciation. So, more likely than not, may mga items na mid-year binibili. And honestly, you don't need to be intimidated. It's the same concept. You just have to adjust kapag mid-year. So going back to our very first example, sa Winston Printing, binili raw niya on October 1. And our company ends at December 31. So this is a mid-year purchase. So anong itsura niya now? Anong itsura niya now in terms of depreciation? Well, ang maiiba is same format na 120,000 cost minus your residual value. The first step is you get your depreciable amount, 108,000. The next step is you try to analyze ilang months ba yung mangyayari sa first year ko and ilang months yung mangyayari sa last year ko dahil naputol siya. Right? Naputol siya eh. Yung 12 months naputol. May tingi sa first year, may tingi at the end of the year. Right? So ano yung tingi? 3 months sa first year because October, November, December. And then may tingi at the last year. So after December, you still have 9 months. So January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. So ang maintindihan nyo lang is that unlike the previous example, my annual depreciation would be not equal. So let's take a look. The depreciable amount, step 1, is 108,000. Step 2, divide the depreciable amount by your useful life, which is 4 years. 108,000 divided by 4 years is an annual depreciation of 27,000. Now, I will ask you, What is the carrying amount in 2023? A lot of you will be tempted. Sabihin nyo, well, we're in year what? We're in year 2020. Maybe it's 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. Maybe ang gagawin ko is 27 times 4. And then, so 27 times 4, how much is that? My guess, sabihin nyo, is that 108 yung act depth nito. 108. Na shortcut ko. 108. But that would be wrong. Why? Because hindi full year yung 2020. 3 months lang. Right? 3 months lang. So technically, you need to solve for how many months? From the date of purchase to December 30, 2023. It's 3 months in 2020 and then 3 years in 2021, 2022, and 2023. So technically, you need to get the 3 years and 3 months. So how do we get? Ano yung shortcut natin for this? Ang magandang shortcut is how many months from the date of purchase to December 31, 2023. Well, it's 3 months in 2020, so October, November, December, para matapos yung 2020. 12 months sa 2021, 12 months sa 2022, and 12 months sa 2023. So, you add all of those. 12 times 3, 36, plus 3. From the date of purchase, you have 39 months worth of depreciation. But this is in years. So, para makuha natin yung act depth in terms of the shortcut, we need to divide 27,000 by what? By 12. It will give you 2,250 depreciation expense per month. So, times 39 months. My act depth, therefore, would be 87,000. 87,750. So, pwede nyo pa rin i-shortcut. Pero, hindi na siya shortcut via years. It's a shortcut via months. So, again, kung nalilito kayo sa shortcut, let's just do the table. Matagal lang siya gawin, right? So, para hindi kayo ma-time pressure, ang suggestion ko, huwag kayong magpamatay ng oras sa notes receivable and depreciation expense problems unless may mga shortcuts kayo. Something like this. So, ganun lang yung shortcut, right? So, if you jump forward a bit, 87,750 because this is 39 months worth of depreciation. Pero ito, we have to put it in its monthly. That's lang the shortcut. Kasi sobrang tagal nito gawin, right? Parang what took us 2 minutes will take you 10 minutes and that's a lot of time, right? But the point lang of this is that yung 27,000 nahati yan into 3 and into the 9 months. Kasi 'di ba ang general rule for straight line is that the depreciation expense should be the same per year, which is true. Pero in year 1, butal siya 3 months lang. Kaya naging 6,750. And then dun sa last year, which is nabutal ulit, 9 months, naging 20,250. So nagiging weird lang yung straight line depreciation kapag may mid-year expense. Pero when you add them together, that's still 27,000. That's still 27,000. So please be careful kasi usually ang tatanong sa inyo is, what is the depreciation expense in the first year? So if you answer 27,000, mali na kayo. Or what is the depreciation expense in the last year? And sasabihin nyo 27,000, but mali na kayo. Because you have to prorate depending on the months, right? So please be careful when it comes to mid-year purchases. Same concept kapag double declining. Right? Same concept for double declining. So double declining, same pa rin. Get your DBR. It will still be the same. Get your DBR of 50% kasi 1/4 naging double decline. So 50%. Now, ang problema, bakit naging 13% to? It's because that's 50% times the number of months. The DBR is an annual rate. Pero months lang yung nagastos natin, hindi naman buong year. So it's times 3/12 equals 13%. Yun lang. Ang babantayan nyo lang naman is first year and last year. Pero ang maganda sa double declining, you don't have to worry about the last year. Kasi diba 50, 50, 50. In the last year, same format naman eh. Na rather than applying your DBR, you always force the last year to be equal to your carrying amount. So, ang depreciation expense mo would be 13,125 minus 12,000 na carrying amount, which would be 1,125. So, yun. Basically, parang again, pasada lang siya of the processes. You can, again, in your own time, talagang master nyo. Dito talaga lalabas whether you really took the time to answer the exercises. And my wish is that before the quiz tomorrow, sobrang confident na kayo sa depreciation para mastery na lang for module 3. So last, and ito talaga yung pinakamahirap sa depreciation is, what if a company changes its depreciation method? Well, first step, don't panic. So if a company changes its depreciation method, don't panic. Ano lang yung requirement? Ang requirement lang naman niya is that kapag nag-change ka ng estimate this year, will change your depreciation for the current year and for your future years. Again, this is important for theory. If a company changes its depreciation method, ang requirement lang is for that company to change the depreciation expense for the current year, number 1, and for future years. Hindi mo na iibahin yung depreciation mo for the past years. There is no retroactive change in depreciation expense is not allowed. So, example, bumili ako ng building. Depreciation ko expense ko from years 1, 2, and 3 is 100,000 per year. So, year 1, 100,000, year 2, 100,000, year 3, 100,000. Nag-iba ako ng estimate. Nag-iba ako ng residual value, nag-iba ako ng useful life. Yung depreciation ko now in year 4 became 200,000. Ang requirement sa akin is, nag-iba ako sa year 4, so ang depreciation expense ko is 200,000 in year 4, in year 5, 200,000, in year 6, 200,000. Pero yung years 1, 2, and 3 remains the same. Hindi ko siya papalitan. So again, for theory, if there is a change in depreciation method, the only requirement is that you apply the periodic depreciation expense for the current year and for future years. Hindi pwede ang retroactive change. Retroactive means papalitan mo yung depreciation expense mo for the years that have already passed. Right? So there's no retroactive change. So finally, and honestly, ito na yung pinakamahirap in terms of depreciation, is paano ba mag-revise? Well, the first step is look at the year where the revision came from. So let's say 10 years yung useful life, and then in the middle nag-iba. The first step is look at that date and determine ano ba yung carrying amount and yung remaining useful life ko on that particular date. From there, I can calculate the new depreciable amount, or NDA. And then our new depreciation expense will be our NDA divided by the remaining useful life. So, again, if there's another exercise na balikan nyo, it's Vasquez SE Ledger. Right? So, it shows an equipment, may 32,000. And then, for some unknown years, hindi pa natin alam, pero may ACDEP na siya of 9,000. The depreciation resulted from using straight line with a useful life of 10 years and a residual value of 2,000. The company concludes that the equipment has a useful life of 7 years instead of 10. So, nag-iba. 7 instead of 10. Kailan yung date? Well, hindi pa natin alam yung date, but alam natin that the ACDEP during the time of change is 9,000. So, first step, let's determine the carrying amount during the point of change. So, that just is cost minus ACDEP. So, 32,000 of equipment minus ACDEP. So, during the time of the change, the current carrying amount is 23,000. But now, the question is, how many years has passed? Kasi kailangan natin malaman kung ano yung remaining useful life. Well, we can simply just solve this. We have our cost, 32,000. We have our residual value, 2,000. We know now that my depreciable amount is 30,000. And the original useful life was 10 years. So, ang annual depreciation ko before any change was 30,000 divided by 10 was 3,000. 3,000 every year. Eh, alam ko na may ACDEP is 9,000. So, 9,000 yung ACDEP ko, yun yung naipon na depreciation. Ilang years for it to reach 9,000? Well, if my annual depreciation is 3,000, 9,000 divided by 3,000, 3 years. 3,000 in year 1, 3,000 in year 2, 3,000 in year 3. Naging ACDEP 9,000. So, we're now in year 3. So, now, ang remaining useful life ko is 7 years. Ilan na yung nagamit? 3 years. So, ang remaining useful life ko is 4. So, 3 years have passed. So, we're in year 3 now. We're in technically year 4. So, 4 years to go. Right? And now, alam na natin yung new depreciable amount, and because alam natin yung carrying amount of 23,000, the residual value stays the same at 2,000. So, parehong nag-iba yung residual value and yung useful life. Papalitan nyo lang to. Gagawin nyo, from 2,000 naging 1,000. Di gawin yung 1,000. Right? So, yun lang. Just in case magkaroon ng parehong complication. So, 21,000, useful life of 4 years. So, 5,250. Right? So, wait. Kindly give me a moment. I'll stop the screen. I'll add another layer of complexity para lang appreciate nyo. Kindly give me a moment. Okay. Okay. Game. So now, ang iniba ko lang is, 'di ba, yung unang change, yung remaining useful life. So na-accommodate na natin 'yon by knowing 23,000 yung carrying amount and yung useful life is now in 4 years. Ang iniba ko lang is, what if aside from the change in useful life, nag-iba rin yung residual value. Before, it was 2,000, but now, iniba to 1,000. So, ang gagawin nyo lang, nothing to be rattled about. Instead of 2,000 na old residual value, we use the new residual value. New residual value of 1,000. Now, you'll have a depreciable amount of 20,000. So, 20,000 divided by 4 is 5,000. So, same lang. So, ito yung original. Sorry. So, ito yung iteration A. Iteration A, iteration A, 2,000, 2,000. Wala tayong iniba. Because wala tayong iniba, 21,000 yung depreciable amount. Kaya, our annual depreciation is 5,250. Versus, nung iniba natin ng 1,000 to, nag-iba lang yung depreciable amount to 20,000. Kaya naging 5,000. But, what I'm showing lang is, you don't need to be afraid. Kung nag-iba yung depreciable amount and yung residual value, that's basically how you do it. So, last question, in terms of change. Alam mo na, yung annual depreciation is 5 years. Yung sa bagong change. From January 2023, may 3 years to go ka pa. Kasi January 2020 na right now, kung kailan mo pinalitan. Gusto nilang malaman, ilan pa to January 2023? 2020, 2021, 2022, so 3 years. So, gagamitin mo na yung shortcut. So, 5,250 is our original annual depreciation, yung hindi mo pinalitan yung residual value. Times 3, your ACDEP is 15,750. Your carrying amount in Jan 1 is 23,000 minus your ACDEP of 15,750. You will get 7,250. And that is your carrying amount. So please, if you really want to get high in terms of depreciation, change in useful life, bantayan nyo to. So if you understand Vasquez SA, the two examples, itong two examples, ito rin yung sa residual value, you'll be able to have a good score sa depreciation. Yun lang naman eh. So, we're done with depreciation. And again, sorry, paulit-ulit, please don't take the subtopics for granted. The reason I'm saying this is because back when I was a student, ang fina-focusan ko yung mahihirap, which is good, right? Like for example, I focused on notes receivable and depreciation. Hindi ko na naaral yung disposal. Hindi ko na naaral yung exchange. Hindi ko na naaral yung intangible asset. Only to find out na, okay, may mga long problems na may depreciation. Let's say worth 10 points. Na dahil hindi ako masyadong magaling, I wasted my time answering those 10 points. Probably because nag-aral ako, I get 6 points out of 10. But yung trade-off ko, yung remaining 10 points for the intangible assets, the gain and losses for exchange and disposal, hindi ko masagutan. So, in total, minus 14 ako, let's say. Versus, meron akong onting alam sa depreciation, mga 4 points out of 10. And I was able to answer all subtopics, like 10 points. So, instead of getting 6 points lang, I was able to get 14. So, again, for those na naghahabol, ganun dapat yung mentality. So, with that said, let's memorize or let's master disposal. And for disposal, sobrang dali lang niya. All you have to do would be 2 steps. Update your depreciation, and then so that you can get the carrying amount at the time of sale or at the time of disposal, and then you get your gain or loss at disposal. So, if the disposal value, kung yung binenta mo is higher than the carrying amount, so let's say my carrying amount is 10,000, nabenta ko siya ng 20,000, so syempre, that's a gain. My disposable value is higher than my carrying amount. Versus, 10,000 yung carrying amount ko now, binenta ko ng 5,000. My disposal value is less than my carrying amount, it's a loss. So, yun lang yung idea. So, tatlo lang naman yan eh. Retirement, meaning hindi mo nabenta, ni-retire mo lang, hindi mo na ginamit. Number 2, binenta mo, so may sales price. Or number 3, nag-exchange. In any of these scenarios, sometimes magkakaroon ka ng gain or loss on disposal. So again, theory tayo. Theory muna. Gain or loss on disposal are classified under other income and expense. Again, gain or loss on disposal are classified under other income and expenses. Gain or loss under other income or other expenses. So, tatlo yung aralin natin. Retirement, sale, exchange. Punta muna tayo sa retirement. Yung retirement, if let's say walang residual value, ang mangyayari lang dyan is that you will have a reverse. I-reverse mo lang yung entry. Di ba yung ACDEP natin, the normal balance is a credit. Now, it's gonna be debit ACDEP. And then yung PPE natin, normally it's a debit. Now, it's a credit. What we're doing is de-recognizing the asset. Wala na tayong asset na fully retired. Now, that is for retirement. Let's say partial yung depreciation, may residual value. So now, ang mangyayari is step 1. So ito yung literally, ito lang yung kailangan yung gawing steps for retirement. Step 1, credit your PPE at its cost. Step 1, credit your PPE at its cost. PPE, 44,000. Step 2, debit your accumulated depreciation at the time of retirement. ACDEP, 37,000, 37,000. Step 3, check kung merong difference. Right? Check kung may difference. 37,000 debit, 44,000 credit, may missing na 6,000 na debit. And that 6,000 is a loss on retirement. Loss on retirement. So tatandaan nyo, if it's on the debit, kung hindi nyo alam kung gain or loss, di ba debits are associated with expense. So pag debit siya, it will always be loss. Kapag credit, it's gain. Dahil retirement, you can never have a gain. You'll just have a loss. Yung loss mo is yung 6,000. Right? So again, for retirement, so literally, ito lang yung i-memorize nyo to get full points for retirement. Step 1, credit your PPE at its cost, 44,000. Step 2, credit your ACDEP at the time of retirement. So ito, 44. Step 3, check kung balance. 44, okay, happy tayo. Walang loss. Next scenario. Step 1, credit your PPE at cost. Step 2, debit your ACDEP at the time of retirement, 37,000. Step 3, meron bang nag-balance ba? No. May 6,000 na debit. Ano kaya to? Debits are associated to expense. That is a loss on retirement, which is filed under other expenses. So with that, anytime na may retirement problem, may sure 2 points kayo, right? Same concept applies for sales. Ano lang yung naiba? Meron lang additional step. Step 1, credit PPE at cost. Credit PPE at cost. Step 2, debit ACDEP at the time of sale. Debit ACDEP at the time of sale. Step 3, debit cash. How much cash did you receive? Step 4, nag-balance ba or hindi? Step 4, nag-balance ba or hindi? Usually, kapag may extra credit, that will be, if there's an extra credit, credit gain on sale. Kasi credits are associated to revenue, revenue gain on disposal. Pag may butal sa debit, debit are associated to expenses, so loss on disposal. Literally, ganun lang. So, reviewing yung super straightforward exercises, step 1, ano lang yung huwag niyong kakalimutan, please, 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 update your depreciation. So, I make it seem easy in terms of yung pag-compute. Pero ang nakakalimutan ng mga students is i-update nyo muna yung depreciation nyo. I-update nyo muna. I-update nyo muna. What do I mean? Nag-sell ka ng equipment September 30. Yung ACTEP na binigay sa inyo of 42,000 is on January 1. So meaning, kailangan nyo munang i-depreciate until the point of sale. So we have to depreciate from January 1 all the way until September 30. So yun lang yung huwag niyong kakalimutan sa sale or sa retirement or sa exchange. Make sure titingnan nyo kung kailan ni-retire, dinispose, or in-exchange. I-update nyo muna. I-update nyo muna yung carrying amount. Right? So, i-update natin. 6,400 is the annual depreciation. Right? 6,400. Let's now multiply that by 9/12. Why 9/12? Because we need to depreciate for January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. 9 months. So 9/12. So 6/4 times 9/12 is 4,800. So 4,848. So now so first step, dito na tayo. Credit PPE at original cost of 72,000. Step 2, debit cash proceeds of 20,000. Step 3, ACDEP at the time of sale. So that is 42,000 plus 4,800. So that is 42,000 and 48 will be your 46,800. And then last step is, ano yung kulang? Well, 72,000 to, this is 66,800. May kulang na 5,200. And dahil debit yung nagkulang, debits are associated with expenses, and therefore, this is a loss on disposal. Ibay naman natin. Ang cash na receive mo is 28,000. So ano yan? Gain or loss? Well, you just follow the journal entry. Step 1, credit your PPE at original cost. 72,000. Step 2, debit cash proceeds. 28,000. Step 3, debit accumulated depreciation at the point of sale. So that would be 42,000 plus 4,800. 46,800. And then now, ano yung butal? May 2,800 kang credit that you need. So now, your gain of disposal is 2,800. Bakit 2,800? Because there's a missing credit. Credits are associated with revenues. Revenues are, credit means it's a gain. So gain on disposal. So basically, ganun lang yung steps, right? Last, extra question. What if for extra 2 points, how old was the equipment on January 1, 2020? paano nyo isosolve yun? How old is the equipment in January 1, 2020? What you do is you get your act depth of 42,000, divide nyo by 6 because that's the annual depreciation expense. 42 divided by 6 will be 7. It means that the equipment is 7 years old. So ganun lang If it's asking you how old is it, it's just act depth divided by depreciation expense, right? So 42 divided by 6, it's 7 years old. Okay, last iteration for sale. Dapat sa sobrang galing nyo mag-journal entry, you can answer Sudoku types of question. So paano kung sinabi ko sa inyo, I recorded a gain of 2,000 when I sold my machine for 25,000 and yung original cost niya is 50,000. What is the act depth of that machine during the point of sale? That's my question. Paano nyo isosolve? Well, usually, magpapanik na kayo. Kasi bagong set of question. But you just go back to our process. Again, step 1, credit your PPE at original cost, 50,000. Step 2, debit your cash proceeds of 25,000. Step 3, debit your act depth. Oops, hindi natin alam yung act depth. Okay, let's skip that for now. Step 4, hanapin yung gain or loss. In this case, it's a gain of 2,000. Dahil it's a gain, saan natin ilalagay? Sa credit or sa debit? Yung gain, saan natin ilalagay? Sa debit or sa credit? Well, gains are classified as other revenue. Other revenue is considered under credit. So yung gain will be a credit of 2,000. Now, my total credit is 52,000. My debit is 25,000. Yung missing na ito, the missing debit is probably the act debt. The act debt, therefore, would be 52,000 minus 25 is 27,000. So, honestly, memorize the journal entry, memorize the way we solve for it, sobrang mali yung gain or loss. Ano lang yung tatandaan? Credit kapag gain, debit kapag loss. And all of these are gain or loss on disposal, retirement, and exchanges are classified other incomes and expenses. Yun. And then finally, sa exchange, rather than getting the cash proceeds lang, ang kailangan natin kunin is the cost of the new PPE. The cost of the new PPE is the fair value of the old PPE plus the cash paid. So, let's just go through this. Si Cordero. Si Cordero, ang fair value raw ng old PPE natin is 19,000. And nag-pay tayo ng 5,000. So, the value of my new PPE will be 24,000. So, ano yung gagawin natin? Well, first, debit new PPE cost, credit cash proceed of 5,000, credit old PPE at cost of 61, debit act debt of 28, and then kung ano yung butal, which is basically a 14,000 debit, that will be a loss. On the other hand, kapag bago ulit yung scenario, gagawin nyo ulit, so debit new equipment, credit cash proceed, credit old PPE at cost, debit act debt, may butal ulit, this time a credit, it's a gain or loss on disposal. So I will leave it up to you to master exchanges. Pero honestly, you just need to find so pag no commercial substance, parang all you have to do is just equate it in terms of your new PPE. So ganun lang yung gagawin. So in terms of like other So when to use book value and fair value. So basically, kapag commercial substance, what we need to do is to get our fair value of our old PPE plus get the cash proceeds, right? So ang tatanungin niyo sa akin, ano po yung book value, fair value? Yung book value ng equipment is the 61,000 old equipment minus the act debt, pero hindi yun yung gagamitin nyo. Ang gagamitin nyo is yung fair value of your old PPE, right? In order to get yung cost of your new PPE. So, basically, ito lang naman yung kailangan yung i-master in terms of exchanges. So, in terms of our gear up or ramp up for our exams, if you want exercise with no commercial value, let's do that. Pero ang priority ko right now is just to make sure na gets nyo yung fundamentals in terms of your exchanges in preparation for your quiz. But good question. Yep. There. So, yun. So with that said, after 1 hour and 35 minutes, we're done with PPE. The last 25 minutes, again, puro subtopics lang yung intangible assets and mineral resources. Pero sayang. So please, ito talaga magandang source of extra points. So for intangible assets, please memorize, again, classifications. Ano yung mga costs na you will classify under or capitalize under PPE. And then, I will highlight one important aspect na ito na yung tatandaan nyo muna. R&D costs, research costs are not intangible assets. Again, research costs are not intangible assets. You will see it in your exercises. Pero marami kasing nalilito, sir, parang ang R&D ba parang intangible assets? In terms of 99.1, these are not intangible assets. May mga specific conditions, but it rarely meets it. So, research costs are not intangible assets. Yun yung pinakaunang thing that you have to remember. So, what are intangible assets? Well, intangible assets are those that win. They're not physical, walang physical substance. It's identifiable, so you have contractual legal rights and it's separable and it's non-monetary. So, basically, ang matatandaan nyo lang naman is that you will always report it at net intangible assets. Ang difference lang is that if you PPE mo, you depreciate. For intangible asset, you amortize. It's different names, but it's the similar concept. Ano lang yung importanteng tandaan? You only amortize intangible assets that have finite useful life. Again, you will only amortize intangible assets that have finite useful life. So, pag indefinite, you only test for impairment. So again, kapag finite useful life, you amortize periodically. If indefinite useful life, you test for impairment annually. But regardless, kung finite or finite or indefinite useful life, there will still be an additional test for impairment for both. So now, ang focus ko lang is, again, R&D are not intangible assets. Research costs are always expense when incurred. Development costs, there are very specific conditions on when it may be capitalized. The key terms are commercial viability and technical feasibility. But most of the time, R&D costs are expensed. Most of the time, R&D costs are expensed. Unless it has met so much criteria, itong 6 na to, which is very rare in terms of the instance. You will see it in our exercises. So, ang kailangan nyo lang naman tandaan for IA is ano yung outright expense, ano yung capitalized for patent, copyright, trademark, franchise, and goodwill. For patent, ang kailangan lang is that any expense in order to secure the patent, similar with land or in equipment, you capitalize. Anything that is to defend the patent, may patent ka na but you'll defend it, outright expense. R&D costs, outright expense. And then, how do you amortize patents? It is the shorter of the legal life of 20 years. In the problems, we won't give you the legal life. So please memorize. It's the shorter of 20 years or of the useful life. So what does that mean? If yung useful life ng patent mo is 30 years, shorter of 30 and 20, we will amortize over 20 years. If your patent, scenario B, has a useful life of 15 years, shorter of 20 and 15, we will use the shorter, which is the useful life, which is 15. So let's account for patent. R&D costs, again, are not intangible assets. They are outright expense. Kasi, yun. So, 1,600. Next, legal fees to register. Well, that's patent. Filing fees to register, patent. Patent defense, legal fees, expense. So, 300,000, 2,050,000. Ang patent mo is 300,000. So, again, with R&D, nag-purchase ka raw ng equipment to develop the new machine. That is expense. That is a developmental cost. Nag-research salaries. Again, that's expense. Cost of testing, that is expense. Legal cost of filing for patent, that is patent, capitalizable. Fees paid to the government, capitalizable. Drawings required, so cost that you are required to spend to acquire the patent. So, ito yung ika-capitalize mo and ito yung i-expense. So, again, ganito yung journal entry. Debit patent, 240,000. Debit R&D costs of 2,250,000. Credit cash of 2,490,000. So, itatanong ko sa inyo, or itatanong sa inyo, how much is the total intangible assets? The answer should be 240,000, which is the patent. The R&D are not intangible assets. R&D costs are not intangible assets. Yun. So now, alam natin na 20 plus years. So, finite ang patent. Copyright, again, same thing lang naman. Ang kailangan nyo lang tandaan is that the legal life is plus 50 years after the death. Right? Yun lang naman eh. Life plus 50 years. So, shorter off. Trademark, on the other hand, usually, and please remember this, if silent, trademarks are indefinite. Trademarks are indefinite. May special scenario lang na may legal life na 10 years, pero when you think about it, it's renewable every 10 years. So in essence, it's indefinite. So ang gagawin natin for trademark is that we're not gonna amortize it, we're just gonna test for impairment every year. So trademarks are not amortized, they are tested for impairment. Siya lang, out of all, ang indefinite. Si franchise, there is an indefinite franchise and there is a finite franchise. Ang importante lang kay franchise is advertising costs, you outright expense. Right? So, yung franchise, kapag finite yung useful life, amortize mo lang based on the terms. And then finally, you have goodwill. So goodwill, we don't amortize. We recognize this from, so we test for impairment. So ang importante lang for goodwill is that goodwill has to arise when the entire businesses are purchased. So ang goodwill, hindi siya nag-a-arise kung pare, magandang customer service mo or magaling ka mag-deliver. Of course, those are things that will elevate your brand. But goodwill can only happen kapag may biniling entire business. Again, goodwill can only arise when an entire business is purchased. There are other factors that will improve goodwill. Good branding, good CEO, good employees. Pero you will only realize goodwill when entire businesses are purchased. Kailangan there should be a purchase that should happen before goodwill is recognized. So, I will leave you with the other exercises for like yung mga intangible assets. I wanted to focus on patent kasi dun marami nagkakamali. Ang importante ko lang gustong sabihin sa goodwill is the goodwill arises when there is a purchase of an entire business. Yung botal, yun yung goodwill. So, ano yung kailangan yung i-memorize? Trademarks, most of the time, are not amortized. It's indefinite. trademarks are indefinite, goodwill is indefinite, patent is shorter of useful life in the legal life of 20 years, copyright is the shorter of useful life and 50 years plus the death of whoever owns the copyright. And then the franchise, if it's short term, depends on the terms. So, yun. We're done with intangible assets. Super bilis lang. It's because it's very similar to straight line depreciation. Kailangan nyo lang alamin yung mga useful life. Finally, we have mineral resources, which are basically physically extracted and non-regenerating. So basically, you'll have lang what you need to capitalize, and then you'll have your exploration, evaluation assets. And then, your mineral resources should be net of mineral resources. So ito, depletion naman, ang pangalan. And if sa amortization, it's just straight line. For depletion, it's just units of activity. Iba-iba lang yung pangalan nila. PPE depreciates, mineral resources depletes, intangible assets amortizes. Right? So, kindly give me a moment. I will just double check some slides. So, in the journal entries, maraming nagko-consult sa akin na parang, sir, in terms of the other exercises, or parang in terms of mineral resources, bakit ang nakikita ko po, ang tinatanong, COGS, cost of goods sold, hindi po depletion expense? Well, you have to go back to our recorded lecture na tatlo yung journal entries for mineral resources. You have first, i-recognize mo yung mineral resources. So that's mineral resources, debit, credit, cash. Second, kapag na-extract mo, that will be inventory, debit, credit, act, depletion. So, ang difference lang is that some scenarios, depletion expense, credit, act, depletion. Pero in some instances, ginagawa siyang inventory. So, debit inventory, credit act depletion. And then, pag nabenta mo, it's COGS, credit inventory. Okay, maraming nalilito dito. So, gagawa tayo ng exercise para magets nyo how it should work. So, kapag may tinanong sa inyo sa mineral resources na may COGS, you will follow this sets of journal entry. So, balik tayo kay Jackie Chan Mining. Si Jackie Chan Mining, nag-purchase siya ng 7 million na mine that has 28 million tons of ore. 4.7 million yung na-extract niya, and then out of the 4.7 na na-extract niya, 700,000 are sold. What are the 3 journal entries that you need to do? Journal entry number 1, record the mineral resource. 7 million niya binili, cash, 7 million. Number 2, let's now solve for yung na-extract. Kapag na-extract mo yung ore, magkakaroon ka ng accumulated depletion. Pero rather than saying it as a depletion expense, you will treat it as inventory. Kasi yung ore, ibebenta yan. So it's gonna be inventory. So same way, we first compute how much should be the depletable, the carrying amount or the act depletion. Depletable amount of 7 million. Ilang ores yung meron? 28 million ores. So our depletion per ore is 0.25. So our DPU is 0.25. Ilan yung na-extract? Yung na-extract is 4.7 million. So our act depletion, yung total amount na na-deplete, 1,175,000. So ang carrying amount na of my mine is 5,825,000. Pero ano yung journal entry ko? my journal entry after the extraction would be debit inventory 1,175,000, credit act depletion. Sometimes, may mga ibang treatments, depletion expense. But, pag COGS yung tinanong, gagawin itong inventory. So now, ano yung tanong ko? First question, after the extraction, what is the carrying amount of your ore and what is the carrying amount of your inventory? The answer to that question would be, the carrying amount of our ore is the cost minus the act depletion of 1,175,000. So our carrying amount for the ore would be 5,825,000. 5,825,000. The carrying amount of my inventory, yung ibebenta kong ore, is 1,175,000. Next, out of the 4.7 million, 700,000 raw yung nabenta mo. So therefore, we just get 0.25 DPU times the 700,000 ore na we sold. We will get COGS of 175,000, credit inventory of 175,000. So ganun lang. So, ano nangyari? You have 4.7 million ore, i-debit mo siya as inventory rather than depletion expense. And then pag nakabenta ka na, we just multiply the 700,000, the amount, times the DPU to get our COGS. And then i-credit natin yung inventory. So, if tinanong kita, after 700,000 ores were sold, how much was the COGS? The COGS would be 700,000 times the DPU of 0.25. It's 175,000. If I ask you, what is the inventory after 700,000 ores were sold? So, meron pa tayong 4 million na natira. That would be 1,175,000 debit minus credit of 175,000 will be, so 175, 1 million minus 175 will give you 1 million. So out of the yung 1.1 million, 175 naging nabenta, naging COGS, 1 million naging ending. Yun lang yung importante sa mineral resources. I will repeat this tomorrow before the quiz kasi marami nagkakagulo in terms of this, right? So please take note. Ito yung kailangan yung aralin for mineral resources. With that said, in that 2 hours, and I think this would serve as our also review na rin for module 3, we're done with PPE, intangible assets, mineral resources, and of course, alam na rin natin na investment property is held for sale. So, are there any questions? Honestly, may tanong lang, what's the difference between periodically and annually? I just put periodically because sometimes baka may mga companies na yung year nila is not really one whole year. So, you have to, per term, right? So, but in general, a lot of companies amortizes periodically. It's just medyo synonymous to annual. Depende lang on their business operation in years. So, I think that was the only question I missed there. Are there any questions or everything clear? So, Alea, James, Justin, Luther, Asia, Trish, Vicky, thank you so much for attending. So I think it's 10 p.m. For now, I'll officially end the recording. I'll try my best to upload it. Knock on wood, kaya ng internet ko. So I'll officially end the recording.